Hi there. So today is the first Sunday of Advent, which Carol Ann did a very nice job of explaining during our live stream today as we celebrated the first Sunday of Advent. It's the beginning of the Christmas season, and maybe you can tell from my backdrop here today that Christmas has come to the Bent house as well. Rhonda has been decorating a bunch. A little while ago, I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, Carrie cut some pine sprigs and it's got some pine cones, and we have this little sign in our house. And so she left a sign that said, "Too soon," with some of this Christmas stuff. And Rhonda took that as a challenge, I think. She was like, "Hold my beer," or I guess maybe more like "hold my eggnog." Anyways, and boom, Christmas started to be everywhere in the Bent house, and the lights went up, and it's been lovely. Really enjoying it. I love it, and it's not just the Bent house. 98.1 CHFI. They go to an all Christmas music program usually, but this year with everything going on, they decided they were going early, and so for like a week now, I think they are all Christmas music all the time, no matter what. And even last week, I walked into Winners. I needed to get some work gloves for work, and I walked into Winners, and the place was packed with Christmas shoppers. So I walked back out again, COVID. But people are definitely still planning on celebrating Christmas. On the 25th of December this year, Christmas is going to be celebrated again since Emperor Constantine decided that was the date we were going to celebrate Christmas on, 1700 years ago. But is it going to feel like Christmas? Is it going to feel at all like Christmas? Our region here in Barrie recently got upgraded or downgraded. I don't know what the right word is, but we are now in the orange level of whatever COVID stuff is, and so there's all these new restrictions that we're going to have to, experience. And then on Wednesday, the Ontario government announced their plans and the rules around the Christmas season this year, and that means that we aren't supposed to be traveling outside of our region. We're not supposed to visit family. We're not supposed to get together for Christmas with anybody outside of our household. Man, can you even call that Christmas? Like, is it Christmas if you have to wipe everything with hand sanitizer before you open the present? Like, I don't really know. Even the elf on the shelf had to make changes this year for Christmas. Had to adapt, had to come under the new guidelines. And I know that this is on a lot of our minds this year. I mean, how can it not be? How can it not be, right? My grandparents, when I was growing up, my grandparents had this garbage can in the room that I used to sleep at when I would go to my grandparents' house. And Gramps was a surgeon, and so somebody had bought this for him as a joke, I think. And I used to love this garbage can. And the picture on this garbage can was of this little boy in a doctor's office getting ready to get a needle in his butt. And I used to think that the picture was hilarious and a little bit scandalous, because you could almost see the little boy's butt. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is terrible. Now, this painting was actually done by an artist named Norman Rockwell. And this picture has a really prominent place in my memory, because when I think about staying at my grandparents' house, I always think about this garbage can, because it was right at the foot of my bed by the television that was in that room, and so I was always looking at it. Now, Norman Rockwell is an incredibly famous artist. Norman Rockwell started working for the Saturday Evening Post in 1916 as an illustrator. And he painted all sorts of different things for them. He painted a ton of different covers for them, like covers of the magazine, 321 covers in all this guy painted for them. But he is perhaps most famous for his incredible Christmas illustrations that he would do every year. And he would usually do a couple of them a year. And he's famous for them. And he did a lot of them. In fact, more than half of that 321 covers, more than half of that were Christmas related, Christmas themed. And in fact, you probably even know some of these, and you don't even realize you know them. That's how embedded in North American culture his artwork is. It's how powerful they are. And they were all these images of sort of the perfect American family enjoying Christmas. They were pictures of exhausted department store employees after the Christmas Eve rush, or they were pictures of quaint Santa Clauses. In fact, the Coca-Cola Santa Claus that is sort of famous as being one of the original Santa Clauses was actually a Norman Rockwell-inspired Santa Claus. Sometimes I think that when you and I are dreaming about the perfect family Christmas, this is actually what we're dreaming about. It's his images, his paintings, his influence that's kind of in the back of many of our minds, even if you've never actually seen one, even if you've never actually had a Christmas like that, right? It's part of our North American collective cultural memory or dream. Think about it this way. It's what every Hallmark channel Christmas movie is selling you. It's what it's trying to lead to. It's the conclusion of every one of those movies, right? There's always like a problem, there's a crisis, and then finally at the end, everybody realizes that Christmas is amazing and they come together as family, and there's always this warm, happy ending. I mean, even one of my favorite Christmas movies, Die Hard, right? Even Die Hard kind of ends this way, after explosions and killing and missiles being blown up, shot off, and a building being blown up. After all that happens, at the end of the movie, this husband and wife who were having troubles, they come together, they realize that they love each other, and it's Christmas, and they're going to spend Christmas together as a family. Yay, right? It's that warm, fuzzy, perfect Christmas story ending that we all want. And so how are we supposed to get that if we can't even leave our house? How are we supposed to get that if we can't travel to be with family except for essential travel? How do we have, this perfect family Christmas in the middle of COVID? How do we do that? Is it even possible? Here's the reality that I think we've all got to come to grips with. Christmas is going to suck this year. I think a lot of us are coming to that conclusion that Christmas is going to suck. I mean, at least it's not going to be what we hoped it could be. At least we know that it's not going to be what we're used to. It's not going to be what we want it to be this year. Case numbers in Ontario of COVID are going through the roof. We're all suffering from COVID fatigue, and so people are not abiding by the rules, and we're seeing more and more restrictions being applied, and we are not going to be able to get together with family for Christmas this year, especially the way we're used to. COVID sucks. There is no way out of it. It really, really sucks. And it's not Christmas, right? So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. No, just kidding. But here's the thing, right? What if none of that is what Christmas is all about? What if that's not what Christmas is about? What if we're upset? What if we're all starting to feel upset because we're losing something that's not actually Christmas anyways? What if? Here's what I mean by that, okay? So first, what if it was all an illusion anyways? What if we got sold something? Here's the thing about Norman Rockwell and his Christmases. Norman Rockwell wasn't actually painting images that reflected what the American Christmas was like at the time. He wasn't painting images of what was. He was painting images of what he maybe wanted it to be, but more likely he was painting images of what capitalism and commercialism wanted it to be. He was selling something that wasn't even true. This is really important to understand, because sometimes it can feel like we look at those images and it's like, oh yeah, that's what Christmas is. But when he was doing it, when he started painting those images, that's not what Christmas was. in a way, he helped to invent that. Right? He wasn't just reminding Americans of what Christmas was. He was helping to shape it. It might actually all be a bit of a lie. There's a professor of art history and American studies named Carol Ann Marling, and she has studied this. She's studied this extensively and done quite a bit of research and writing on it. And this is what she says. It's a bit long, but I want to read it to us because I think it's important, and I think it's going to be important this Christmas. She's talking about how, and I think what I want us to understand too is when we talk about the influence of Norman Rockwell, it's not just that you and I have been influenced by his artwork. It's that he influenced an understanding of Christmas that went on to influence what came after it, that influenced what came after it. And so when I say that almost every Christmas movie that we like to watch, like the movie Elf, for example, the movie Elf is influenced by what Norman Rockwell did back in 1913 and beyond. And so here's what she says about his influence. Norman Rockwell is generally credited with the invention of the modern American Christmas and the tender sentiments attached to it. Kindly Santa Clauses who ponder each juvenile request, merry Dickensian travelers bound for home on cold winter nights, cozy hearths, windows aglow with warm light, spilling out across the snow, fathers and grandfathers in red suits and beards, sprigs of holly and mistletoe, mysterious packages, tired sales clerks and exhausted department store Santas. Rockwell helped to create the outline of a secular commercial holiday suffused with the intense feelings of a religious ritual, but a ritual in which he largely declined to participate, except as a shrewd and not unsympathetic observer. See, that's powerful, that you and I, in a sense, we're chasing after a dream. We're chasing after something that's an illusion, that's kind of a bit of a lie, that wasn't even true in the first place. And the problem is what that does is it gives us unrealistic expectations. Maybe that's why Christmas sometimes feels like a bit of a letdown. Because we have these expectations of what it's going to be and it never quite lives up, maybe. Because we build it up too big in our minds. And so this year, especially with COVID, give yourself a break. Don't raise those expectations so high that there's no chance of them ever actually being met. So first, maybe we're chasing a lie. So hold on to that for a second, because the second is this. The second thing about all of this, that maybe this isn't really what Christmas is about. The second thing I got thinking about is a lot of people don't get to have that Christmas anyways. Christmas for them is never a perfect family Christmas. Maybe they don't get along well with family. Maybe there's tension and maybe they're alienated from their family. Or maybe they're just not, they just can't physically get together. Their family is separated, by, across the country or across the world, that it's just not possible. There are a lot of people who can't afford to have that kind of Christmas, who can't afford to spend money decorating their perfect house. Maybe they don't have a perfect house. Maybe they can't afford to provide food and gifts and things like that for their children. There are a lot of people for whom Christmas is always a difficult time of year, is always a lonely and sad time of year. A time that reminds them that they are not part of the have group, but are part of the have-nots. And so maybe this Christmas, maybe this is one of the things that can come out of a, Christmas in a pandemic. Is maybe we will all become just a little bit more compassionate. Maybe we will all begin to put ourselves in other people's shoes as our maybe traditional family Christmas feels like it's been taken from us. Maybe we can actually begin to understand what it must be like for so many people who never get to have that, who never get to experience that, who never get to be a part of that kind of thing. And so maybe this Christmas will give us a chance to soften our hearts, to learn to sympathize and empathize just a little bit more with others. Maybe that's something good that can come out of Christmas in a pandemic this year for all of us. That as we feel, maybe some of us feel something taken away from us, maybe now we're getting a hint, an understanding of what it must be like for others all the time. And so I kind of wanted to talk about that. But here's the other thing that I wanted to talk about over the next couple weeks as we go through the Christmas season. Listen, Christmas is gonna suck this year for some of us. COVID sucks, and it's probably gonna make Christmas suck a little bit. It's not gonna be what it used to. But here's my words of encouragement for us all. The first Christmas sucked too. Now, this might seem like a bit of an extreme statement because we're all so used to seeing these like beautiful nativity scenes. Everything's so wonderful and happy and lovely and great. And because we took this sort of secular holiday and this sort of family thing, and we took this religious ritual and we kind of smushed it all together, we get these warm, fuzzy feelings when we see a Christmas nativity set. Maybe you grew up with one. I did. I grew up, we always had a nativity set. And so when the nativity set goes up in my house, oh man, that's how I know. That's how I know that Christmas is coming. Because the nativity set's gone up and it's warm and it's fuzzy. But the first Christmas wasn't like that. The Christmas story is a story of oppression, and it's a story of slavery. Here's how the story starts out in the book of Luke. For some of you, maybe you remember this. Luke starts his story, starts his account of the birth of Jesus by reminding us and making sure that we aren't going to miss how horrible this story is going to be. Luke chapter 2, verse 1 says this: "Now in those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that a census be taken of all the inhabited earth." In my house, every Christmas morning, we would start the sort of Christmas celebration by reading the Christmas story. I have read this passage of Scripture so many times. A decree went out from Caesar Augustus. La, 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 la. What's Luke saying? First, Luke starts his story by using Caesar's name. Anybody reading this story in the world at that time knows what that means. They know that they can't read his name. They weren't going to read Caesar Augustus without feelings of terror, fear, deep, deep sadness, anger, longing. Luke is making a point here. Caesar Augustus issues a decree. He passes a law. He sends out a command, and all of these worlds have to obey him. And then not just that, but this passage arrogantly says all the peoples of the inhabited earth. That was the Roman Empire at the time. That's how people saw the Roman Empire at the time, even though now we know that wasn't the case. For them, the Roman Empire spanned the entire inhabited earth. They had taken over everything. And so Luke starts his story by reminding us of domination, of oppression, of a country coming and taking them over, of a loss of freedom and power. Caesar Augustus issues a decree, and you must obey. He goes further and he says, the first enrollment occurred when Quirinius governed Syria. So now Luke is reminding us that not only is Caesar, not only is the Roman Empire coming in, but now they've instilled other governors over you. Another person to rule over you, another person to dominate you, another person to tell you what to do in your own country, another foreign dictator. The Romans had invaded and conquered the land of Israel. Can you imagine if this was Canada? Can you imagine if the U.S. had invaded Canada and they had conquered us and they had taken us over, and now whatever decree they issued, we had to obey. We'd lost our land, we'd lost our country, we'd lost our home, we'd lost our rights, we'd lost our freedom. And then not only that, but now they have the audacity to issue a decree that we all have to go and get counted. Why do we have to get counted? Because they want to make sure that they are getting every bit of tax money they can get out of us so they can continue to go and conquer others and conquer others and conquer others. We have to help pay, we have to slave for them so that they can go and do this to other nations. Talk about adding insult to injury. This is the Christmas story we are celebrating every 25th of December. We are celebrating a story about oppression and violence and essentially slavery. Basically, the nativity scene that we are all familiar with, it's a little bit like those images that we have in our history of slaves being unloaded from slave ships. And that was a symbol. That was something. That was an image of domination. It was an image of control. It was an image of conquering. It was an image of violence and oppression. And the nativity is that. The nativity reminds us of a time when one country did that to another country. It's a symbol. It's a reminder of oppression and violence and fear and anger and hatred. We've all spent most of our lives with an image of the first Christmas that isn't anything like that. Many of us, our idea of Christmas is idyllic. It's beautiful. It's lovely. But that's not what it was at all. They were, for the first Christians, this was a reminder that if they did not obey, they would be crucified. If they did not obey, the Romans would come in and just destroy them all. And then on top of it, this whole story is also a reminder that in a world where infant mortality rates were sky high, Joseph has to take his very, very, very pregnant wife and travel through dangerous terrain just to go get counted by an oppressive regime. I mean, can you imagine how that felt? There's nothing ideal. There's nothing quaint. There's nothing warm and fuzzy about this story. It sucks. This story sucks. So here's the thing. Why tell you this? Why do I want to talk about this? Because for some of you, maybe you're sitting here thinking, oh man, you're doing it again, right? It's already bad enough, Nathan. It's already sucks enough. The COVID's already doing its thing. Do you really have to take away everything from us? Here's why I want to tell you all these horrible things at Christmas. Here's why I think this matters. I think it matters because the Christmas story has so much more power when it's a true story. There is power and hope and joy in the actual, true Christmas story. I think there is more power and more hope and more joy in the true Christmas story than there is in the weird Rockwell Christmas weird ritual mashup nativity scene thing that we do. So maybe this year we will actually all start getting just a little bit closer to the truth of Christmas. Maybe we'll start to get a bit of an understanding of what the first followers of Jesus would have experienced, how they saw the Christmas story, how it felt to them, the story of their birth. Their Christmas sucked. But for them, it was a story of hope. It was a story of new life. It was a story of a new future. And that same story exists for us today. This horrible story, it changed everything. Their Christmas sucked too, but it changed the world. And so over the next few weeks, what I want to do is I want to look at this Christmas story like that. I want to say, what is it like to enter into the difficulty, the hurt, the pain, the oppression of this original Christmas story? What's it like to let ourselves be a part of that? And what does it have to teach us? What hope is there in that story? What joy is there? I want to look and see why in the middle of that story, in the middle of that horrible story, the angels could say, don't be afraid. Look, I bring good news to you. Wonderful, joyous news for all people. I want to find out why. And that's the journey that we're going to go on for the next couple of weeks. That's the journey we're going to go on. Their Christmas sucked. But years later, we are still talking about all of the amazing things that came because of it. And so just because our Christmas isn't going to be what we're used to, just because this year it's going to be difficult and different and maybe painful for some of us, that doesn't mean that it maybe can't be the most powerful moment in all of our lives. I'm hoping that this year, as we go through the Christmas season, I'm hoping that I can remind us that it's going to be okay. That God has not abandoned us or left us, that there is still hope, there is still joy, there is still goodness, there is still life, life that is rich and full, even in the middle of Christmas in a pandemic. And so may you have hope. May you be encouraged. May you realize that this story still has power. And it has power even though it sucked a little. So God bless, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me. Bye.